Hello and welcome back to another edition of Reel It In. It's a beautiful spring day. I think it's May 7th, and it's starting to feel like it ought to. I'm Dan Sapin. I'm here with my friend Martin Hallberg in Stockholm. Hey, Martin.
Hey guys, how are you?
And we've got Joe Messina to lead us into another stimulating topic, what are we talking about? Joe.
Well, I so so I have found lately, and this has been a long process, but that mental health, seeking mental health care is not only logistically difficult, financially difficult, um, and and just personally difficult. People have to, in a state of bad mental health, find out how to get care for that, and it's very difficult to do anything when you feel that way. But 1 second, I'll cut this out. Yeah. My wife brought me food, and she didn't want to be on camera.
How dare she?
Um, but so not only is it difficult in all those ways, it also in the kind of society we exist in, and it could be that therapy and mental health care emerged out of capitalism and this kind of societal formation we have, but it it really doesn't um uh, it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't bring you all the way when um there's financial stress, when there's you know um uh
Bell's going off all the time.
yeah. When there's financial stress, and there's the stress of working, and there's physical problems that you can't get taken care of because of the same societal problem. um and it's starting to occur to me that, like, well, yeah, the point is to get you back working, basically. It's like that's what's important. um and I have found that, like, there's very little urgency on anyone's part when you are in uh crisis, unless you're suicidal. Because
Mm-hmm.
I have had moments of suicidal ideation and that kind of thing, and that's the only time when, and this has bad implications, but, like, that's the only time when it's like, oh, we got to jump into action. It's not like, oh my god, this person is at rock bottom, and uh you know can't uh can't function, can't, like, have a good and fulfilling life. It's it's either, all right, we got to get you fucking working again, or, like, because otherwise it's like, well, are you gonna kill yourself? No? Okay, then fucking.
Joe, they get that part wrong also. As you were talking, something came through to me, which, correct me if I'm making more of this than I ought to, but I was thinking, I was watching, the really popular network soap opera, A Million Little Things, which just had its final episodes, like this show about the exaggerated, intertwined relationships among a group of friends who came together over tragedy. And there was the final episode, a character who's been sort of battling cancer the entire series and has helped other people sort of find their way and keep their dignity and their laughter. He's dying, end stage cancer, delightful topic, handled very sensitively, I'll say. But it got me thinking that we have hospice care, we have doctors getting in trouble left and right for prescribing too many painkillers, too many opioids, which, there are reasons for that because the drugs are kind of crude, but at least they're an attempt to make people's physical pain better. And they do help the mental pain to a degree. But when was the last time anybody was ever given hospice care or comfort care for psychological agony? When you're in psychological agony and talking about suicide, they throw you in the proverbial rubber room. And while I'm not going to disparage psych wards more than they ought to be disparaged, but they're not comfortable places. They don't let you have anything that might stimulate the delusions, exacerbate them, like reading material. You don't have your phone, shoelaces. At a certain point, they'll let you wander around the unit and talk to people, but for the most part, you're being surveilled, you're being watched. And the other piece that goes with the suicidality is that, to me, I've never met a person who didn't think about suicide on some level, even in the midst of feeling horrible about life and losing prospects and hope. That if a person dares to think of the autonomous act of choosing when and if to end their own life, even hypothetically, 9 out of 10 shrinks are going to pull the emergency cord way too soon, rather than finding out what the suicidal thinking is really about, because it's rarely about actually wanting to die. It's usually wanting to change the channel and make some shit stop. Yeah. But again, we miss that point. Our psychic pain meds, unless it's high doses of antipsychotics or benzos, which make it hard to live. Again, you can't live all that well or be all that productive on them. Most of those antidepressants take weeks to work. We don't have anything resembling pain management for the mind the way we do for the body, and the body's isn't that good either.
Yeah. I can, I guess, just briefly verify, like, from my short work in the psychiatry over here, but I did work all last summer in the mobile psychiatric emergency unit in the Stockholm hospital there, and also during my internship. It's this kind of suicidal point that really matters, from their point of view, which is terrible, but it's true that that's how it actually works. That when those kind of points starts to come up, that's when calls are being made. Okay, we can shuffle this doctor's appointment, you can come. On the other hand, if somebody's kind of threatening to kill themselves over the phone, when I worked there, we would say, okay, if you're going to continue this, we'll send an ambulance over. And then they will stop, So they would use, some of these patients would use the suicidal kind of threatening situation as a bargaining post in the discussion, which is really tragic. It makes me think of prostitution almost, in the same sense that, your body, your life, your self-worth, your subjectivity becomes, a part in a larger transactional space where, they need something, right? They need to be seen, they need to be heard, they're crying out for someone to listen, I guess. Or that would be my interpretation from working there, answering the phone. There would be some people calling every day to this emergency unit, and they were the people who had lived alone their whole life. A lot of them with some affective disorder, and they would, I'm just calling to say good night. Some of the people would like call in, using you almost as a family, an institutionalized support point to just have someone to talk to. And I mean, I think that whole thing says quite a lot about, to Joe's point, like where we are, if that's the state of things, that, you need to have suicidal problems or ideation, or whatever you want to call it, in order to gain some kind of space or traction to talk about your situation, then, there's not much room for a real meeting of citizens or people. Or and I guess it's interesting because we were talking about Bion before this episode, and his language of achievement, the term that he uses to kind of denote the capacity to have a language that can harbor pain, have a mind that can contain also painful emotions, not only joyous emotions, is almost like this image of the psychiatry is the opposite of that. Like we have to evacuate everything that is difficult to contain. The only thing we can't evacuate is if somebody says they might want to end their life. Then, you know, there is some kind of decency that kicks in, or some kind of responsibility that is also, I guess, legal and economical and all those kind of things. But when it's just like very difficult life situation and a lot of pain, it's like that whole thing is just being filtered through, you know. It doesn't get caught up in there, which is crazy in a way, because that's where it's supposed to land. If an individual can't contain it within himself or his family or his wider social support networks, that's why he would go there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, this reminds me of the fucking subway murderer that just popped off here in New York.
Yeah, that was crazy, man.
Yeah, with
The
it's
fuck
and it's
was
like
that?
the fucking brain disease that America has given its citizens is like people can't see past the moment, which, you know, it seems like it wasn't a life-threatening situation for anyone else. So, you know, it's still like, well, that, you know, it doesn't justify the action at all. But like, people can't see past the moment and their own fucking head, that they're like, oh, but like, it's a threat. Like, what are we gonna? And it's like, this guy is not like, this guy didn't set out to be a homeless guy who was
I mean,
going.
the one who was choked out.
Yeah. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the problem with this guy is that he's homeless. It's
Yeah.
that he's hungry, and like, it's people think that it's a moral failing, um, in a place where policy decisions are are being made every day. Not only have been made in the past, but are being made every day, uh, that just make it harder and harder. First of all, easier to get into that position. Like these, like fucking working class people walking around thinking that they're not like, you know, 2 degrees away from being this guy, but like, uh, it, um, uh, yeah, like, uh, but also to that it's harder and harder to get out of that position. What is he supposed to do? He walks in somewhere with like his filthy clothes, and like he hasn't had a conversation in how long with anybody, and he walks into a place and says, "Can I have a job? Can I have an apartment?" Like, how does that work? It's insane.
Yeah.
And
You know
then,
what? Give me a couple of weeks to show you that I'm not a complete loser.
yeah,
Nobody is going to. Chances are he's not going to find a bed in a shelter. But, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, my gosh, how many people are saying, you know, friggin' woke, whiny, snowflake, pearl clutching liberals, you know, give me a house, give me food, I'm hungry. That's the kind of talk we're hearing lately. But when was the last time you saw a stranger or imagined a stranger responding to a psychologically distressed person with the same empathy they would show to a person who had fallen and was in pain and bleeding? And this, I think, is part of this whole spectrum of otherness. The spectrum of otherness. Figure out what else is in the spectrum. That to be insane or to seem insane, rather to be in pain and saying things most of us wouldn't say out loud on a subway, means we're crazy. If we're crazy, we're dangerous. If we're dangerous, we're not only a deficit to society, but we're useless and a drain. And we're also, drum roll please, we are other. We are alien because we don't live in the same reality as all the honest, decent, hardworking people on that train, who, of course, as you say, are a half step away from that position themselves, because half of them are spending 75% of their income on rent and have nothing to fall back on, much less insurance or disability insurance. If one of them, I don't know, blows out a knee and can't
Yeah.
go to his physical job, but nobody is saying, oh man, you must be really hurting, when you are talking to yourself from the sheer agony of it, of not knowing if you have a place to sleep that night. And then you take it to Joe's topic, which is productivity. So you're not like us because you're talking weird. You're very uncomfortable, and that makes me uncomfortable. So get the fuck away. You haven't bathed, even though, well, of course not. You don't have anywhere to live, and there are no showers on the street corners. But just the same, get away. You smell. And oh, and by the way, get a job and stop being a parasite. On top of it, and it's productivity as opposed to I don't know, Maslow and fulfillment. Fulfillment. Where'd you get that idea?
Yeah. Yeah. And, that reminded me too that, like, for a country that so many people walk around talking about fucking Jesus and shit, um, what did Jesus do? Oh, I've heard this somewhere. What would Jesus do in that situation? And
Which chapter?
right. And I'm not saying I'm Christ-like. That's the whole idea, is that he's an ideal, and we can't be him. But isn't the idea to take Christ-like actions when you can, and like recognize when you're like, I've been walking around thinking that, like, that I'm so special, and that, like, homeless people are so whatever, and, like, what if I was kind in this moment? And I have done that before, and again, like, people can think I'm virtue signaling or whatever. I don't care.
Go for it. This is our show. They don't like it. Tune out.
Yeah.
Signal.
But, like, I've done these things before, and found that homeless people are, it's going to surprise you, people. So most of them are pretty approachable.
Where are your loyalties, man?
Like, mostly nice people, and it's varying degrees. Like, one time on the subway in Philly, there was a guy. It was like a pretty routine, like, homeless encounter. This was a guy just walking through the cars being like, hey, anyone got change, any food or whatever? And I had an extra, like, protein bar or whatever, so I gave it to him. And I was like, the way I looked at it was like, there's a human being in front of me asking for food. I'm not thinking homeless, not homeless, this, that. Like, I mean, he might not have been homeless. I don't even know, right? Like, he wasn't like he wasn't in, like, the dirtiest clothes. He wasn't like, I don't know. He didn't look like he lived on the subway the way, like, some people end up doing. But, like, it was like, asked, answered, done. And I remember right after that, there was two people sitting next to each other, and, like, across the car a little from me, and one of them leaned over to the other and said, that guy's jacket looked kind of nice for a homeless guy. I'm like, so this is interesting what's happening here. First of all, it's the, like, weird kind of what do they call it, means testing. It's like, again, the America gives its citizens this brain disease because this is what we do to people who are struggling. It's like, well, you make more than $24,000.31 a day, like, a year or whatever. But, like, that also said to me, like, this person is now justifying, they're trying to justify why they didn't help the person. They're going, oh, well, I mean, if I had a reason to really think he was suffering, if he proved it to me somehow, then I would have helped. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, the jacket, and uh and to another point, like, I've been in situations with someone in a much worse, like, having a much worse moment. So this was in Boston. I was at the Amtrak station, and there's always a few homeless people sleeping and, you know, spending time in there, because that's how things are now. Um, and there were these two homeless guys like harassing another, and I don't know what was going on, but they were like kind of like taking stuff from him and doing the like, oh, come get it, and like, I think they stole like like food or like a blanket from him or something, and he kind of chased after them for a bit, but they ended up like way far away. And then this guy was like packing up his stuff, and he was like kind of muttering and yelling, and like just he had been screaming at them from across the thing and whatever. It was like, if you do the stupid brain disease America thing, you're like, this is scary. This guy, look at him. He's all dirty and he's yelling, and I don't know, like he's unpredictable. And it's like, first of all, like I understand trying to stay safe, but like to just always be like, if there is even 0.001% chance of anything happening to me, then I don't want to be involved, is disgusting. But also it's like, well, what's happening here? What would happen? What would happen if my housed ass got someone harassing me and stealing my stuff? How would I react in public? Like, it doesn't, like, I wouldn't be like reserved because I'm in public. I would be screaming at them.
Yeah.
That's literally all that's happening here. So I went to the guy and I gave him a bottle of water or something. I said, hey, like, you okay, man? And he was like, yeah, just these fucking guys, whatever. It was like, oh, I just had an interaction like I would with any other person. So it's again, it's just I know this is like a little bit of a tangent at this point, but like that's the really just the most recent like really dark fucking turn that this country has taken.
Martin, I know you haven't said much yet. I just want to throw one thing at you, Joe. What you said before about the nice jacket and people trying to come up with reasons why they didn't give. If people were just being authentic, saying what they really meant, they might say to the fellow, oh, sir, I understand, but you're going to have to debase yourself a little bit. Now, come on, show me just how bad is it? Come on. No, you don't get this for free. Show me how fucked up you are. As if somehow you had to be really pathetic before another human being is going to give a damn.
Yeah, so why wouldn't they be authentic, right? That's the key question in all of this, I think. Like what I'm thinking, sitting here, I don't know if I can develop this or elaborate it. It'll probably be a little bit weird, but what I'm thinking is, obviously there is something really, how do you put it, fake about the whole thing that Joe is explaining there. Like the need, the kind of image, the caricature you make of society is in many ways one most people would understand. And while you give that story, everybody also listening are thinking like, it's fucked up, right? The society that you are describing there is a sick one, right? That's where we get. So how do we deal with the idea that the society is actually kind of sick or whatever, that we fail to do the most kind of fundamental? It's almost like, if you think of, if we bring it back to mental health, like you could have a certain kind of symptomatology or a disease or whatever you want to call it, and the more you try to fix it, the more it reinforces the symptoms, right? So you could take like panic anxiety or obsessional kind of ideation or something. The more you try to kind of block, or you can go to the Buddhists, right? The more you resist fear, the stronger it will become. That whole kind of figure, which is easy to understand. And that's also what you're describing, right? We're in a society where we don't look each other in the eye, we don't help each other out, we don't talk to one another, we're not genuine with one another. And that whole thing is exactly what reinforces the need to do that, right? So it becomes that kind of loop in a way. So if we're all just basically dysregulated and unhappy and not connected to one another, then all of these diagnostic kind of things, they become made up things to cover the basic flaw that's in the fact that we're not there for one another. And the fact that we're not there for one another necessitates the need for these diagnoses and manualized treatments that are supposed to fix them, and so on. So if one plays that kind of scenario, like a like a reproducing compulsion, what do you call it, repetition,
Repetition
compulsive,
compulsion. Yeah.
yeah, like the Freudian death drive thing, repetitive compulsion thing. I would land there somewhere on this kind of genuine aspect. Like, what is it that makes it so difficult for us to be genuine with one another? Where is that voice that is able to cry out in the night, and dare the risk of taking a kind of leap of faith in order to expose oneself to something that you don't know where it'll end up?
You just nailed it, man. When you described um, ignoring one's own inhibition about connecting to someone who is suffering as a leap of faith,
yeah,
you're absolutely correct. But think of how bad that looks for the prospects of, I don't know, humans, or at least this batch,
this batch
that
of
it's
humans.
a leap of faith to give a suffering person the benefit of the doubt that they're not trying to scam you, or that they even
Yeah.
deserve help.
Yeah. Or, I mean, inversely, it's a leap of faith to believe that somebody will actually listen to you when you reach out, when you cry out in the night, when you approach a friend or you approach someone and actually want to talk to them instead of calling the psychiatric hotline, like, hey, there's these problems. If you would do that within the societal fabric today, that would be a big leap of faith, right? Whereas in a normal world, it shouldn't supposed to be a big leap of faith. There should be people there for you to turn to, for anyone to turn to, for normal kind of existential. Granted, we're not talking about like serious illness here, like schizophrenia, or like there are certain severe mental conditions that also carries usually a strong genetic kind of component. But a lot of the things we are talking about, I think, could sort under this. The need to be seen and heard and talked to and cared for and understood and validated and reciprocated and all this stuff. That's what rich people can pay to do 5-7 years of dynamic depth therapy to do, right? But in a normal situation, we should be able to provide that to one another. Or am I being crazy here? I don't know.
You're far from crazy.
I
Go
don't
ahead,
think,
Joe. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think you are at all. But I also think, and I kind of forgot this in my uh, liberal screed, but I'm in the like Marxist side of this is that, well, what is mental illness? And again, like, it's different when you have something like schizophrenia, or there's a whole list of things that are serious and probably just emergent of the brain chemistry. I don't know, but like, I think most like routine mental illness can be largely attributed to material, like conditional things. Like, I've told my psychiatrist before, who, she's fine. She mostly prescribes meds and just does check-ins, but like, I've told her, like, I'm on 3 antidepressants. Like, I feel like they don't do nothing, but also there's a, you know, there's a ceiling here because life kind of sucks, you know, and I'm a lot better off than some people, but like, it's like there's this and this struggle that I have that are unnecessary things that society imposes on people, and I don't see how I medicate out of that, especially when I find myself in situations where it's not such a problem. Like, I will go spend a weekend with my good friends from college, and I don't feel like, oh, I have depression while that's happening. I'll go spend a weekend in my friend's cabin in Maine, and where I don't have any responsibilities, and I'm not sitting there like I'm so depressed. Like, no, I'm looking at a lake, playing video games, doing what like, and I feel great. Um,
Yeah.
so it's like a little bit, uh, I don't know what people think is like sort of the modern uptick in like depression diagnoses and all this stuff. And it's like I don't think suddenly we have so many people with like broken brains.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, this is something we were starting to notice some years ago. But again, there are ideas that most of us can nod our heads at and say how interesting, and oh yeah, that defines my new way of looking at things. And then tomorrow, wake up and have no idea what it was you were thinking about. And so, one of those things would be the idea that um, depression is an illness like any other illness, or that alcoholism is a disease, which brings me back to Martin and I. We were talking briefly about Thomas Szasz, Szaszz, who was the anti-psychiatry psychiatrist. He was not actually anti-psychiatry. He was against the institutionalization of psychiatry as this discipline that separated the good from the bad, the one that the courts and judges, the criminal industry, refers to, so that you basically make psychiatrists and hospitals wardens, jail keepers, jailers rather than healers. Um, so I think what you're talking about here is very valuable, Joe. Szasz, who was considered, lunatic fringe by some, and really the only sane person in the profession for a long time, should be read again. His main point, Thomas Szasz, when he wrote the two big books were The Myth of Mental Illness and The Manufacture of Madness, was making the point that and I'm reading straight from Wikipedia now, but it's pretty accurate as I remember it. Szasz argued throughout his career that mental illness is a metaphor for human problems in living, and that mental illnesses are not illnesses in the same way that physical illnesses are, and that except for a few identifiable brain diseases, there are neither biological or chemical tests, biopsies, or necropsies that can justify any DSM diagnosis. So what you have is a whole bunch of illnesses which do not register as illnesses in any other respect. They freak people out so that it's hard to get care. And if you get care, it is likely to be the blank-eyed review of symptoms and pharmacology with a psychiatrist who has less therapy training in many cases than a college peer counselor. And we come back around, and I want to hear more of what you have to say on this, Joe, and Martin too, about what it is about productivity. Where do you work? Where do you weave in the issue of work and productivity as opposed to living well in some respect? Because productivity, what do you contribute, is a bottom line. It's one of several. Productivity as opposed to living well. I just heard base.
Yeah, I was pulling up a Thomas Szasz video lecture for later, but
Yeah, he had a death metal phase, so you might want to bypass
maybe not though.
it.
Uh, yeah, that I mean that's exactly it. I think. Uh, as for productivity, I mean, um, I think I think productivity is important, and I think that you know this is where I've started like I'm very interested in work because Marxism is very much about work, and it's not anti-work, but there is sort of this like more anarchist, more like um maybe even just like non-denominational, like anti-work strain of thought happening on the internet, especially, but like it's understandable with how miserable work is for people right now. But um, yeah, it's a lack of understanding that like no, capitalism kind of ruined work, but like work's always been good and necessary, and still would be uh, after capitalism. But the question is, you know, what work can you do? What can you contribute from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, um, so that you're not locked into a 40-hour week, um, working to earn someone else money while you get a pittance. Um,
Would you like an example of that, Joe, that might shock you?
yeah.
Martin, you up for it? Among the things that Zaz writes about, and I remember this from an ethics course in grad school, you uh, talking about productivity and about, you know, the little bits and pieces you can receive, having to be thankful for what you've got in life. Well, Zaz writes, among other things, that what is sane is, of course, as you know, history is the version defined by the winner, right? But if you have a mother and a child, and the mother has more power than the child, and the child's behavior is inconvenient to the child is labeled naughty. If the child remains naughty, the child has an oppositional defiant disorder. And granted, there are children who can't control their emotions or behaviors. We know that because they grow up into the adults we're all familiar with. Um, and on the other hand, how much of the time, and you know, as a therapist, you're going to come upon this more often than you'd like to. Do you realize that what the kid is doing seems to be a pretty natural reaction to being squeezed into a little cube-shaped partition, a little pigeonhole by a parent who demands that children behave a certain way? And so what's appropriate, that's another, think of what that word means. Appropriate has links to ownership, property. That which is proper is that which belongs to a situation. That which belongs to a situation is defined by the person who has the money and the ability to influence the means of production, the availability of food and clothing. So what you find is, from, even though there are forms of psychological suffering that respond to various kinds of therapy, and those words have meanings that many of us aren't aware of, the ability to define illness just because you're the one who has access to resources and political power is overwhelming. So, did you know that there is a kind of mental illness, which is not really called this anymore, drapetomania? Heard of it? Have you ever suffered from it, do you think? Well, this went on into the 20th century, in which slaves who wanted to escape were diagnosed as insane because anyone sane should recognize that slavery was such an improvement in their lot in life that to leave is crazy.
Who
And
came up with that?
them, the people with the resources, who started it? You know, the notion that the way we have it, let's start with the redcoats. You know, somehow British imperialism being the main original source of this kind of forced normality, forced conformity, in which those who are forced to conform also somehow end up as property and defined as subhuman. That if you don't wear a lot of clothing and you live in the woods and you don't have Christ, you're a savage. And to wear British style clothing and go to a Christian church means you've been converted and saved. If not, you're a barbarian who's going to hell. And besides, it's still debatable whether you're even human. That's something they had the power to enforce. because there was no chance of fighting back effectively. That's why we had the American Revolution, which was a fairly close fight and could easily have gone the other way. Something else that Zaz writes here, great terms. Mental illness, he writes, is an expression, a metaphor that describes an offending, disturbing, shocking, or vexing conduct, action, or pattern of behavior, such as those which are packaged under the wide-ranging term schizophrenia as an illness or a disease. But Zaz wrote as well, if you talk to God, you're praying. If God talks to you, you have schizophrenia. If the dead talk to you, you're a spiritualist. If you talk to the dead, you're a schizophrenic. Depending on who's talking to whom, you are either noble, a good Christian, you are sentimental, you're a medium, or you're a nut job. If you're engaging in the exact same conduct, but from the other direction. Talk to God, you're crazy. No, talk to God, you're praying. Think God talks to you, you're insane. What comes to mind?
You're muted, Martin.
Sorry. Yeah. No, quite a lot of things come to mind. I'm struggling. I'm trying to pin down a few. We're very general and kind of covering a lot of different things here. I'm trying to find a few points to anchor or structure our discussion somewhat. And I mean, one thing that comes to mind that I don't know so much about, that would be interesting to hear if you guys do, is that Mason-Dixie line. Are you familiar with that? You know, the line that separate, yeah. How, like, because what I'm thinking about here is that this kind of camps, right? Because you invoked slaves, Stan. That's how I got there to the Mason-Dixie line, right? You were making the reference to slaves being, you know, being unfree people, whether it's that little naughty child that's being, you know, enslaved by the parent that then guilt trips the child for behaving this way, or if we're talking about actual, you know, the history of slavery, or if we're talking about in the therapeutic situation, you know, therapists blaming their patients for a transferential reaction, whereas actually their own non-processed traumas that come in the way for being there for the patient, right? So these are just but a few of many examples of this kind of abusive or exploitative, or, you know, take the factory owner who refuses to see the condition he puts his workers in, and then when the workers rebel against this, he would reprimand them for being, you know, not fulfilling their contracts, right? You could draw straight parallels from there to like Bezos and Amazon workers who have to pee in bottles, and, you know, those kind of conditions that are actually non-human, you know, they're unhumane in a way. So what I'm getting at with all this, in order to kind of stop that traumatic binding, there needs to be a line of demarcation injected so that one can see what is actually taking place. And I'm not saying this is really the case. I know too little of the Mason-Dixie line, but where my mind went was that it actually enabled a kind of north that was able to reflect upon what was going on in the South, let's say, which would then be a precursor to take action to liberate people in the South. Like, there needs to be established one healthy region of the individual or the group or the society. There needs to be one healthy part of the mind that can establish itself in order to see what has been colonized in the other areas. So, and one metaphor for that instantiated possibility of a healthy part of the mind would be the Mason-Dixie line, like in a metaphorical sense. Like, there's a line drawn after which it becomes possible to see what's going on south of the border. And now again, I don't know if I'm fucking up the historical significance of this concept. If I am, I apologize. But you understand my point. Like a Markov blanket would be the biological term for this, like a boundary that encapsulates a certain part of the organism so that it can be differentiated against other parts. So I think that would be an important thing to investigate here. in order to see what we're kind of talk about when we come to mental health. Where do we draw this line from which we can say what's going on here is fucked up, and what's going on here is more healthy, and from here we can start to take action to help this part.
Yeah. You know, what you described, Martin, could sound extremely abstract, but it's not. What you're describing is, I think, one of the most essential concrete things. Like, where's the dividing line between where it's okay to be a respectful, empathic human, and on the other side of that line, when is it just I don't know, some either social Darwinism where people deserve their misfortune, or where the inferior are lucky enough to be alive and slaves to a good slaveholder, because that's reality, right? There's always a winner and a loser, right? But which side of the line? And as therapists, well, one of the things we think about is creating a healthy space inside the mind of an individual, the part of him that can look in on his suffering and not only see it in a kind of perspective that the person can survive, but also a space in which they can begin their own healing and in which they can be receptive to the healing efforts of someone else. We need to help a person find the part of themselves that works well, or that might. So the Mason-Dixon line, historically separated the slave states and the non-slave states on a very concrete level. But on another level, you're absolutely right. The line stands for, I think, the challenge to separate right and wrong, self-deception, in which you give yourself a nice rationalization for treating other people as less than human.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. And a place where it's not thinkable.
Exactly.
And this is one of the things I think that's happening all over again in this, I don't know, pre-Civil War, pre-Second Civil War time we're in now, in which we have the social movement, the political thinking, the what I consider to be the psychopathology embodied by a large portion of our nation, associated more with the South than the North, although it's not as cleanly divided as it once was, and that part of our population is giving voice to the same kind of totalitarian bigotry that enabled us to be a slaveholding nation, which grew from an even worse, in some respects, slaveholding nation, namely the British, who enslaved a large part of the world, the peoples of the planet. So one of the things we need to pay attention to, this isn't just an abstract psychological thing. It's not a woke review of history. It's literally a bloody evil fact that in hundreds of years we haven't learned the value of being curious and welcoming of people who don't behave or look the way we do. Yes, that's a simplistic formulation, intentionally. That if someone who doesn't wear clothes and lives in a tropical jungle location or in a desert, if someone doesn't look like us and doesn't read the same books and worship the same God, well, kill them or capture them and use them. Or what we have today. I know that we're opening a kettle of fish here, but in America, with Roe v. Wade, with across the board, the conservative leaning states taking the right of a woman to determine what happens to her own pregnancy away from her, reaching over her ego into her body to tell her what she can and cannot do. Because the hypothetical human, the clump of cells, is somehow more human than the human who has supposed sovereignty over her own body and existence. And people can justify it any way they want. But it ultimately, to me, comes down to yet another way that we institutionally say this class of people do not have the right or the competence to self-determination. So we are going to do to them what we say is correct. And of course, they get doctors involved, because what happens when a woman wants to get an abortion? She has to see a doctor and wait 48 hours and all that. Why a doctor? How is the doctor a moral or legal agent here?
All right, so we got something like this line of enabling to see what's right, let's say, or something like that. The line that enables the healthy part to be able to start healing itself and defend itself against the unhealthy part. And we also have something around genuine expression, of being able to speak what's going on and contain painful emotions. I think there's something important there, to be able to contain what's going on at one's own level, whether it's, the government, whatever we're talking about, to know thyself, as they said before. And then we have this repeating kind of move of like, because we know these things, the things that you bring up now, Dan, are things that we know since the 30s and 40s, if not before. We know damn well the importance of the other. The ethical imperative is there just by the face of the other. That you know nothing about the other, and you have to treat everyone with respect. I'm thinking about this kind of Levinas, approach to ethics, as the ethics is fundamentally given by the face of the other, whether it's a woman in the case of abortion, or whether it's this man in the subway. Like, there is fundamental degradation of the other individual. So we have a few blocks here. So I'd like to pass it back to you, Joe, in terms of where you brought it all up, like how to be able to feel reasonably sick in today's world, and face up to the fact that we probably don't get much help from the psychiatric system.
Yeah. So yeah, the thing is, it's like almost impossible to do this stuff on our own. To come up with any kind of solution that, like, I can go and act in my life, or you can go and act. It comes down to really just, it's again, like I said earlier, these are policy decisions, and different policy decisions need to solve it. And like, I think conservatives and even my least favorite liberals will react to the stuff that socialists say whenever these things happen, is that I know you guys want to talk about systemic solutions, but what about in the moment? And it's like, well, yeah, the moment happened, but like, so right, I'm like, well, the moment
Like on the subway train, what happened in the moment on that subway train?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we can talk about the moment, and obviously we feel the way we do, and people can feel, I guess, however they want about it. I disagree with a lot of them, but like, the moment happened, and what if we didn't have to have this conversation again? Now that it did. Like, people are so caught up on that moment that they can't think forward to, like, well, what can be gained from this moment, which is that we should house people, we should feed people, we should educate people aggressively, and yes, without expecting them to like pay exorbitant amounts in return for it. And if they can't, then fuck them, because then we get this. Like, people don't want this to happen, and then you're like, here's how you stop it, and they're like, nah.
Here's something emblematic, though, of why you said policy.
Yeah.
We need a policy to deal with the problems with the policy. But what occurred to me as you and Martin were both talking was that looking at everything from drapetomania, in which it's a mental illness to escape captivity, right, to the incarceration and pathologizing of anybody who's behaving a little funny because their lives have fallen apart. you find that we have pathologized and criminalized dependency and vulnerability, and we have pathologized and criminalized self-determination, which means that we have applied the same negating, dehumanizing standards of wrongness, sickness, and illegality, and human inferiority to two opposite states.
Would you want to say something more about the self-determination, like the criminalization of self-determination?
Okay, well, let's say that one of them will come down to abortion.
All right, cool. Yeah, I got you.
Well, another one would come down to, and granted, a lot of these things have to do with sex, no surprise, that if you want to wear the clothing of another gender, which, by the way, they think gender is biological, it's not even in the ballpark of correct. It is so fundamentally, stupidly in error, as if 2 + 2 = 5. But yeah, that to determine your own taste in clothing based on your own gender identification, to want to manage your own sex life your way, to want to handle your pregnancy the way you see fit, that self-determination, if it offends someone enough, they will invent the right and the law that negates your right. And and if you're having trouble eating and you say so in public in a way that worries someone, you're going to be strangled.
I got you. All right.
Well, so I'll say this. Well, I'll say two things. First of all, I'm going to quote, I might have quoted this already on the show, but I'm going to quote Michael Parenti and say that the revolution that feeds the children gets my support, because these things are not even as common in the places that we doom to poverty, like Cuba and China, and these places that we don't like how they do things, so we try to force them into dire situations. They are still better able to share what they have among their people, and while they're not perfect, that gets my support before any kind of cruel, twisted way of thinking that we have here. My second thing is that what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, do we maybe want to do part 2 next week? Because I feel like I do have to go, but there is a lot here, and like Martin said, we don't have we maybe didn't quite tie it all together, and I think even if it's a heavier editing job than usual, I think we can.
Why not? That's a good idea. We've never really done that before, to extend one thing over 2 weeks. I like it. I thought
it's necessary.
I think what's interesting what you said, Dan, because if you're right that you criminalize dependency and you criminalize self-determination, I see them a little bit, not as opposite maybe, but that they're different functions in a way, right? One being very connected to the other and support and so on, the other, the other to walk out in the world and be more self-sufficient. If both of them are criminalized, then we are captive. And if that too is criminalized, there's nowhere to go. If you can't be dependent, you can't be self-determined, and you can't rebel against being captivized, or you follow what I mean? Then it's really panopticon, Foucault had that vision of, or not vision, but his idea that we're in a kind of prison cell with the guards watching us, but we can't see the guards, so we act as if they're always there. It's kind of introjected, internalized behavior, but that's very gloomy though. Then there's
well, it is gloomy, and I think that the gloomy part of it has to be acknowledged and understood on some level in order to talk about change. Because my problem, one of my main problems with this, criminalizing and pathologizing of not opposites, but these two complementary sort of vectors of human behavior, is that if you can't even recognize the absurdity of the effort because you don't know what you're doing. You're really just reacting to the strangeness of the other. I know these are postmodern terms, but yeah, it's people who weird you out are assigned to categories which can then be pathologized, criminalized, or owned and exploited. Let's throw that one in there as well. That this is just a response to that crazy woke word otherness. And if you think that this system is going to correct itself,
Yeah.
well, the gloomy part is acknowledging the problem, and then we can come back in another episode and talk about if we could redesign this with a little awareness of what we're talking about here, what would it look like? What would we do?
Yeah.
I have some ideas on that.
Oh, I know you do.
Yeah. Why criminalize all this shit? Set it free. If you love someone, set them free. That will be my end point. Yeah.
If they come back to you, they're highly self-destructive.
All right. See you next week, boys.
Bye, gentlemen. Thanks for being a reel it in with us.
Take care. Bye-bye.